If you're starting to hear rumblings in your organization about people leaving, or perhaps you've already had a couple key performers who've left, there's likely something going on that you'll want to identify and course correct. The best way to start with this is with your senior leadership team. Join me in this week's episode of The Happy Leader, where I'm going to talk to you about how to diagnose the primary style of your leadership team. And once you're armed with that information, what to do with it to truly transform your organization. Welcome to The Happy Leader. I'm Amy Sanchez, executive coach to some of the most innovative leaders and teams in Silicon Valley. I'll share stories and tips to help you navigate the most common leadership challenges so you can amplify what matters most: happiness. If you are a regular listener of this podcast, then you will have noticed that we took a little bit of a hiatus over the month of July. That was a really valuable time that enabled me to get out into the backcountry. I actually wandered through Wyoming with my family all the way through South Dakota, had a very valuable time to disconnect from work, reconnect with my family, spend some really valuable time making memories. And it also gave me time to think. June at Swim Against the Current was packed with workshops and company meetings and executive coaching. So that valuable time really allowed me to step away and marinate and strategize, which, as you all know, is so incredibly, incredibly helpful as you think about planning for the future. So I am back with renewed energy, fresh from Yellowstone, having spent a week with buffaloes and by the Grand Tetons. It was truly magical. I hope you had a chance to take some time off this summer as well. What I'm going to share with you today might sound a little mysterious or even mythical, but I promise there's nothing mysterious or mythical about it. By the end of this episode, you'll be very clear on exactly where to go to improve your company performance. In fact, the method I'm going to share with you is steeped in research. I'm going to share with you from my years of working with top companies at Silicon Valley how to truly transform an organization from the inside out. And in short, where do you start? So here's the secret. If you can diagnose the predominant style of the executive leadership team, you can determine the strengths and also the weaknesses of the organization. Much like personal development, it's not until you create awareness that you can truly drive change. The same is true as we think about transforming organizations. And this awareness has to start with the top. Why? Well, everything starts from the top and it flows down. So to make improvements throughout an organization, the senior leadership team is the best place to start, because all of the changes that you implement to this team at the top will start to trickle down through the rest of the organization. Fresh off a trip to the mountains, to the Tetons, it's just like putting something at the top of a mountain. If you sprinkle dust at the top of the mountain, inevitably gravity will cause it to flow down through the rest of the mountains. Similar phenomenon when you start to tweak dynamics among a senior leadership team, this will inevitably impact the rest of the organization. So you may be asking, okay, well, that sounds intriguing. Number one, how do I diagnose the style of a senior leadership team? And then number two, what if a leadership team has an equal blend of styles? Well, let me address the second one first. Rarely we see a leadership team with a blend of different styles because of two things. Number one, 80 to 90% of jobs at the senior level are filled through networking. This is a well-known statistic in the career world. These jobs aren't even found on job sites. You can't even find them on LinkedIn or Monster or Indeed or fill in the job seeking site, because they like to fill these spots within their network. So usually when you're hiring for a senior leadership position, it's somebody knows. They have experience working with them and they usher them in when an executive role opens. To add to that, number two, there is a well-known psychological phenomenon that happens in hiring or any selection process, and it's called affinity bias. Affinity bias is the tendency to favor people who share similar interests, backgrounds, and experiences with us. They feel and they look familiar and they act like me, therefore they must be good. Think back as when you've seen people hiring in the past, and sometimes you'll see teams that look alike, they act alike. This is not abnormal. In fact, it's something that happens probably more often than we give credit to it. So pair these two together. Number one, that we aren't putting out a blanket search for executives. And number two, we tend to hire people like us, and voila, we see senior leadership teams who start to look and act alike. This happens all the time. And you may be reflecting back now on your current or your previous senior management teams and thinking, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Maybe it was something that you didn't recognize or fully have awareness of. But now that you're thinking of it, just look back and see if you can recognize that pattern. By the way, it also contributes to the clash that tends to show up when a CEO is replaced and part of the senior leadership team is also replaced. This becomes the old guard versus the new guard challenge. I've seen a lot of that through my career too and helped companies through that. I will share that with you in another podcast. So you may be saying, well, that makes sense. I can see why senior leadership teams start to take on the characteristics of one another, Amy. But what is this magical solution that will enable us to diagnose the style of our senior leadership team? To diagnose what style a senior leadership team is, I like to apply a scientifically proven assessment that gives us clear data on different individual tendencies. There are a few assessments out there, and they're all good. But the one that I'm comfortable with and the one that I've seen work incredibly well is DISC. DISC gives you insight into each individual's motivations and preferences as they move through their workday. DISC is simple. It's easy to understand because it maps out everyone who takes it to one of 4 styles, D, I, S, or C. Even with such a simple model, the insights and the learnings are profound. I am a widely authorized DISC partner, and I've been using DISC with teams for over 5 years now. The insights and the learnings that I see groups gain from one workshop are always so profound and insightful. It is a true light bulb moment. So let's talk about what tends to emerge when we run DISC workshops and assessments with senior leadership teams. Almost every time I've done this, there has been a predominant DISC style that defines the senior leadership team. And sometimes the presence or absence of one style over another is truly profound. For example, 90% of this style or 75% of this style on the senior leadership team. When we see those kinds of statistics, it can teach us a lot about what's working and what's missing in an organization because that group is acting on this one predominant motivation and tendency, which is giving it a lot of strengths as it relates to that DISC style, but it's also creating blind spots. And understanding what those strengths are so that we can amplify those, and then also creating awareness around what some of those weaknesses are or blind spots can be incredibly powerful and effective and enabling a senior leadership team to think about how to be more effective. Now, as I talk through these 4 different styles, I want you to just think about what is the predominant style of my leadership team and what might be the impact if they understood that and could act on it. So let's start with the beginning of the DISC style, the D. Let's say a leadership team is a primary D style, which we tend to see an over-index on among senior leaders. It is the one style among all the DISC styles that has a higher correlation with senior leaders. D stands for dominant. This is the dominant style. The D style tends to prioritize challenge, results, and action. They move fast and they get straight to the point and they get frustrated when decision making is slow. Conversations get too mired in data and details, and they can consider support conversations with their people to be a waste of time because it They don't see the clear connection between supporting people and the drive towards growth and revenue. I'm currently working with a fintech organization in the Bay Area that has a ton of D executives on their team. My work in this particular project is with middle managers. And it's very interesting to see the impact of this high D senior leadership style in these middle managers because the gaps are becoming abundantly clear. Everything sounds intriguing and exciting. And so therefore everything becomes a priority. Rarely do they slow down to take the time to look at the data and have these meaningful conversations to allow them to prioritize. So if you see an organization that has a ton of priorities, but isn't taking the time to really think about what the top priorities are, but there's a heavy drive towards results, that's likely a D style. However, they are very results oriented. So you'll typically see very high, quick growth with this company that doesn't become sustainable over time unless they create this awareness and course correct. The advantage of this group is that they are fast moving and they try to gain a competitive advantage by being fast moving. But over time, it leads to frustration, lack of clarity, long working hours, and lots of burnout and red flags. Also, development tends to be put to the wayside in a heavy D-style organization, and you'll start to see top talent starting to leave as a result after a while. A good company that comes to mind as you think about a predominant D leadership style, and this is to the extreme, but Elon Musk, classic D leader. He moves fast, but rarely do people report that they feel appreciated and valued when working with him. Now let's move on to the next DISC style. If a leadership team is primarily an I style, this is the influencing style. I groups tend to prioritize action like Ds, but different from Ds, they like enthusiasm and collaboration. This can create a really fun and fast-moving atmosphere where recognition is freely and frequently given. It can also mean that important details are missed and rash decisions are made when accuracy and challenge aren't a focus. An example of a company that embodies this type of a style is Southwest. They are fun. You get on a Southwest flight and immediately their personalities start to come out. There's cheering, there's clapping, there's sometimes music, there are jokes. It's a fun atmosphere. But remember what happened during the holiday rush in 2023 when all their systems went down? That was likely because they were over-indexing on the enthusiasm and weren't prioritizing the details and therefore weren't able to recover when such a catastrophe hit them. Classic I challenge. So we've talked about D, we've talked about I. The third DISC style is S. This is a steadiness style. This style tends to prioritize collaboration, support, and stability. This can create a really safe and incredibly rewarding environment as their primary focus does tend to be on supporting people and tending to their needs. This actually feels really good on the receiving end of this if your leader is an S style. However, the downfall of the S culture and the S leadership team is that they tend to move slow. They can get stuck trying to drive consensus when fast decisions need to be made. They also may shy away from conversations that involved conflict. Conflict is sometimes necessary to weed through all the different ideas and come to the best idea. So the S style can really shy away from those types of conversations because they tend to associate conflict with lack of support. Sometimes the primary S style can breed an environment of mediocrity because there's lack of accountability and you don't have those challenge conversations happening. A lot of nonprofits will fall into this category. High level of support, people who are really, really focused on ensuring that their people are taken care of, but some of the other things can fall to the wayside. Finally, the fourth leadership style as it relates to DISC is the C style. This is the conscientious style. This group tends to prioritize stability, accuracy, and challenge. This type of organization thrives on Excel spreadsheets, analyzing data, and ensuring all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed before making a decision. Nothing is done in a rash or quick hallway conversation style. There is an extreme fear of getting things wrong in this time and environment, and meetings can get stuck on small, minor details that don't ladder up to the bigger picture. Different from the D style, they tend to get stuck in the details and mired in the details instead of forgetting about them and moving fast. So there is a tendency to move slower in this organization because of the extreme focus on details and accuracy. They do tend to, when they do make decisions, they've thought everything through, so there tends to be less mistakes, but the trade-off is speed. They also don't tend to focus on employee development and recognition, and it can feel a little bit dull and sterile to the I and the S personalities who crave more focus on people. As you think about the companies that embody this C style, it's typically an accounting firm or firms who are really, really data heavy. As you can see, there are pros and there are cons to each style in a leadership team, but we do tend to see that leadership teams over-index on one style versus another because of those hiring tendencies. The key to creating any meaningful change is to first create awareness. Imagine if your leadership team was given a mirror to see what their strengths and weaknesses are and how impactful it would be to the organization if they made adjustments to optimize their strengths and minimize their blind spots that are negatively impacting everyone else they oversee. Now, if you went and spoke to middle management or even entry-level management, they could probably tell you what the blind spots and the pitfalls are of senior leadership, but these conversations are not always brought to the forefront, and they're not always happening. I've seen the approach of just creating awareness around the predominant leadership team style be so impactful. I've also seen, as we sort of mapped out this and tied it back to results, I've seen this type of approach and this sort of intensive work with a senior leadership team increase retention. I've seen it improve communication and efficiency and ultimately increase revenue and decrease the wasted spend. Now that you have these insights, the 4 different DISC styles, that hiring bias that tends to happen, and diagnosing the primary style of your leadership team, think about your leadership team. What's their primary DISC style? If you already know, based on what I shared with you of the D, I, S, and C style, then it might be clear to you what's next as it relates to creating this awareness and perhaps making improvements. Now that you have these insights, the D, the I, the S, and the C style, think about your leadership team. What's their primary DISC style? If you want help figuring this out using a data-validated model that's been used by companies around the world for many, many years, just reach out to me and we'll get you and your leadership team some valuable insights and answers. If you already have pinpointed after listening to this the predominant style of your leadership team, think about how you may be able to adjust your approach to appeal to their preferences. And also, if you've been frustrated with a default approach at work that doesn't jive with your style, see if you can use the DISC insights to try and speak the dominant language at work to yield you higher success. Now, if you are at a senior position, perhaps on a board, perhaps a VC, and you're looking, or you're a CEO and you're looking to transform your organization for the better, contact me and we'll talk about what's frustrating you right now and how to make that change and that adjustment. So here's the bottom line. The research is abundantly clear. People are your greatest resource. Ensuring that your leadership team is focused on the right areas, appropriately supporting the high talent in your company, communicating efficiently with each other and balanced in considering the needs of the organization. All of these things can have a profound impact on the experience that each and every employee has when they log into work every day. I'm Amy Sanchez. So happy that we were able to spend this time together. And as always, stay happy out there. Thanks for listening to The Happy Leader. If you would like more information about me, Amy Sanchez, and our executive coaching and team leadership services at Swim Against the Current, visit swim-against.com. And if you liked this podcast, help others who could use the support find it by giving us a rating. Until next time, life is short. Stay happy.